Hello, welcome to our riverbank in Wales. I'm inside Pan's Grotto, surrounded as you can see by autumn leaves, branches almost nude of their leaves now. I've been gifted with one already. I'm sure there'll be more. I'm here to tell you a story. It's the Samhain weekend. It's quite a muggy night, quite warm. I hope you enjoy it. The story's called Granny Hickson's Blessings. The sisters stood together, side by side, but a million miles apart. Bending to lay her posy by the plaque, Isabel's eyes filled with scalding tears. Margaret frowned at her wristwatch. She had a meeting with Bridges and Lane about a new contract in an hour. This yearly pilgrimage was going to make her late. Jack, bless him, had run her bath. Isabel floated among scented bubbles, the whir of the fan heater biting into her brain. Supported in the fragrant water, the weight of loss lightened, and for the millionth time she sought for similarities between herself and her sister. 6 years younger, Isabel had looked up to her sister, but had met contempt in return. It had been Isabel who had moved with her husband and young children into her parents' house, nursing them to the end, as well as bidding farewell to her own children as they set off for university. David lived in Norfolk now, working on a defence project he couldn't talk about. Sarah was a physiotherapist, married and living in Shropshire. She was expecting her first baby in March. Mum and Dad had shared their birthday, and it had been at Isabel's suggestion that they meet that day at the cemetery to remember their parents. Apart from a card on her birthday and at Christmas, she only saw Margaret in October. Each year, over a ploughman's lunch at the Black Boar, she extricated a little more from Margaret about her life. They drove in convoy to the cemetery and left in similar style, with no more than a peck on the cheek between them. Her sister knew nothing of her niece and nephew, and was uninterested that Jack was welcoming early retirement. All Isabel knew was that Margaret's law firm was thriving, and that she lived alone and seemingly content in her Docklands apartment. She tried to talk to Margaret about the house, but she only wanted details when her half share was ready to be paid. Isabel shut her eyes and allowed her dream, the one she and Jack shared, to filter into her brain. The stone farmhouse nestled against the hillside, surrounded by fields of sheep and alpacas. Grandchildren frolicked around the yard, feeding the chickens and laughing at the antics of the goats and kids to get into the feed bucket. Smoke drifted up from the whitewashed chimney. Was this the time? Was now the time to sell this mausoleum of a house and start a new life in Wales? Chill air greeted Isabel stepping onto the patio in her fur-lined slippers and coat. From her garden chair, the constellation of Orion hung above the skyline, both Betelgeuse and Bellatrix dancing to a disco beat and showing their true colours. Above her, the Andromeda galaxy twinkled into infinity. She warmed her hands on her hot chocolate and sent her wish to the stars. The following lunchtime, Isabel met Zoe in town. From what you've told me, it seems you have two choices, said Zoe. You can sell it as it is, as a project, or do it up yourself and make a shed load more money. It's full of junk, that's the problem. It's going to take me months to sort, let alone do it up. Zoe leaned closer. It's never a great time to sell on the run up to Christmas, unless you've a dead cert that people can move straight into. Why not spend time sorting and cleaning and maybe adding a coat of neutral paint and put it up in the spring? Isabel nodded, twisting her spaghetti. You okay? Isabel looked up, eyes teary but determined. I've put this off for almost 10 years, but now's the time. I'll be okay. 2 weeks later, Isabel found Granny Hickson's recipe book. That's what it said in curly handwriting on the brown paper cover, but inside were pressed flowers and herbs, remedies for everything from housemaid's knee to croup in goats, and recipes for cakes, jams and jellies. The book was dated 1922, the year she married Grandad. An image of Granny, her mother's mother, came into her mind, a tiny woman in a high-necked dress, with frizzy grey hair protruding from a severe bonnet. While others embraced each decade, Granny remained stuck in a Victorian novel. Granny winked at Isabel. For the rest of the day, Isabel read Granny's book. The house glowed. 2 pumpkin faces shone from the front bay windows, while upstairs battery candles flickered amid scenes of bats and spiders. A net of fairy lights doused in fake cobwebs glistened in the porch. Most of the bat-shaped biscuits were gone, handed out to variously dressed trick-or-treaters. Isabel was glad to see adults hovering at the gate as their offspring knocked. It was a dark night, lurking cloud covering moon and stars. The bottom of the garden was a chaotic tangle of bramble, blackthorn and nettles, but Isabel had hacked a path through with her dad's sharpened billhook. She lifted her long skirt above her Wellington boots with one hand and held her basket with the other, lighting her way with the torch tied to the front of it. She cuffed at her dripping nose and yanked at the brambles barring her way. About to give up, Isabel emerged onto a grassy bank, surrounded by rowan trees, and towered over by a single magnificent beech. She was the queen of the forest, Granny's book said, and a great enhancer of magic. Stars winked above her, her breath blossoming in clouds as she busied herself below the tree. Granny's book had spoken at length about All Hallows Eve, yet there was no mention of ghosts or ghouls. Instead, every year, at the back of the book, Granny had recounted her blessings, as well as her regrets about the previous year. In the light of 3 church candles, cross-legged beneath the beech tree, on a piece of handmade paper with her fountain pen, Isabel did the same. Her husband, her children, and all her friends, her health and her home were committed to paper. Margaret was there too, the only item listed under regrets. At the end of Granny's lists, year after year, she had written the outcome of whichever fortune-telling spell she had undertaken. Tea leaves were prominent, predicting everything from the sex of her next child to the likelihood of her husband returning from the war. There were candle spells too, but Isabel chose a spell that reminded her of her mother. With her back to the beach, Isabel cast her first circle. The sprinkled salt glistened and then fell among the grass, while her chant rose into the cloudy night sky. Cast the salt, create a world, allow the magic to unfurl. Cast the salt, keep out the night, keep me safe till dawn's first light. Enclosed in the circle with the beech tree, Isabel's fingers lost their chill, and she took up her mum's vegetable knife, sharpened and worn to a shining crescent, and began to peel her apple. It was the biggest she could find on her trees. The hiss of apple juice filled the air, a zesty fragrance tickling her nose, while into her lap the shiny green serpent coiled. With every circuit of the apple the spiral grew, and Isabel's dream blossomed with it. She saw the farmhouse and the stables and sheds and a large field sloping down to the river. Sarah was there, a toddler with bright red bubble curls on her hip, both laughing at the goats butting and kids jumping like jelly beans. David and Jack chopped wood, and she emerged from the back door with a tray of homemade scones and jam. Isabel glanced at Granny's book one last time before standing. O Mother Earth, I give to thee all the blessings of the tree. O Mother Earth, show me some or all the blessings still to come. With her dad's trowel, Isabel dug a hole and buried the apple. Over her left shoulder, she threw the apple peel and stared at the capital letter it formed on the grass. On the 1st of May, Jack drove behind the removal lorry to their new house in Wales. Both the sale of their old home and the purchase of the new one had gone smoothly, once Isabel had decided on the house. They had trawled the internet, but houses in Felinfach, Aberaeron and Llanybadder were all discounted, not because of their suitability, but because where they were began with the wrong letter. Just after 7 in the evening, they followed the lorry up the narrow lane to their new home, Clydach, which meant rocky stream, and on the outskirts of the village of Courtnaworth. 2 months later, with the paperwork on the house complete, Isabel rang Margaret 3 times. She left messages, but received no response. She gave you her bank details, Izzy. Transfer her half and forget about it. I can't, Jack. This is my final link to her, my own sister. I want to see her. Isabel squeezed Jack's hand before she climbed out of the car. The security guard in reception escorted her to the lift and pressed a button for the 3rd floor. The gagging smells of polished metal and new carpets stifled her in the tiny box. Marble floor echoed beneath her feet, and she stood, calming her breathing, at her sister's door. 3 times she rang the bell, its echo ricocheting around the hallway. No response. Ears ringing and her heart ready to explode, Isabel banged on the immaculate paintwork until her knuckles were sore. Head pounding, tears filling her eyes, she turned to walk away. A clunk of metal stilled her as chains and bolts were withdrawn. A grey-lined face peeped through the gap left by the single security chain. Margaret, I came to see you. Isabel? Is that you? Yes, it's me. I've been so worried. The grey head began to bow, and Isabel feared she would shut the door. Please don't go. They clung together like a koala and her baby, earth-shaking sobs threatening to pull them apart. Margaret didn't need to tell Isabel what was wrong. The grey-yellow pallor of her skin was enough. She'd nursed both her parents through cancer and recognised the life-sucking disease in an instant. It was the evening of the 1st of August, and the farm swelled with music and laughter. The tractor barn was lined with bales and strung with rows of lights. At the far end, a table sagged under the weight of food. The band played and the barn dance began. Sarah, with Chloe on her hip, danced with David, while his new girlfriend, Emma, danced with Jack. New neighbours and friends laughed and raised their glasses in celebration of a bountiful harvest. Isabel sat beside Margaret. Wheeled from her annex, Margaret looked tired, but laughter lines crinkled her eyes. Among the whirling dancers stood a tiny lady in a long dress, buttoned to her throat. Isabel smiled, and Granny Hickson winked. I hope you've enjoyed our story on the riverbank today. Do tune in for more. another evening. Good night.